Mind, body, spirit. The body is composed by DNA. DNA is a molecular language encoding information for the development of protein and cell organelles. This language sends information and mutates randomly over generations. These random mutations are selected by environmental pressures, resulting in the change in the informational profile of the DNA. In the same way, the mind is composed of a system of structures which are capable of storing information. The rate of change of information in the mind is much faster than the rate of change of DNA. For DNA to change, this requires generations spanning seconds for single-celled organisms and decades for large mammals. Despite a huge difference in time scale, the change in DNA over time is a change in information over time and therefore a form of information processing with a clear intention survival. The mind, simply put, processes information, therefore DNA is a form of mind. Mind must be distinguished from consciousness by self-awareness. Self-awareness gives us a sense of self, a cohesive soul animated by an inner monologue. It is possible that this aspect of consciousness is not digital. There may be a spectrum of consciousness starting with simple levels of self-awareness, such as in the mirror test. The mirror test is an examination in which the animal is shown its own reflection. If it regards the reflection as an independent creature, it has failed to gain self recognition. However, even human children fail the mirror test, and therefore the aspect of consciousness is not inborn but developed over the span of a person's life. Is consciousness something different than pure perception? Consciousness has an imaginative function where we can consider things beyond our immediate perception in the past and future. We can consider things which are impossible. We can consider the essence of things and quality and essence, that is, redness, greatness, smallness. We can attach moral meaning to physical forms or to forms of behavior. We can think of hedonism as evil or of collectivism as evil. Thus, consciousness is the perception of pure information as information rather than the perception of information as representative of physical stimuli. Consciousness is therefore able to consider the morality of fear and seek its absolution, whereas an animal simply feels fear reactively and cannot perceive the emotion as an object separate from the immediate experience of the phenomenon. The body is composed of DNA. DNA is the source and origin point for the desires of the body. No body can exist without instructions, no information. This is true on a more fundamental physical scale. The perception of matter is mediated by laws which are not arbitrary. The gravitational constant, for example, is universal. Therefore, all matter throughout the universe is acting in reference to non-local information. One theory of the storage of this information is that it is encoded within these particles. Just as the desires of the body are encoded in the information of DNA, the compulsions of matter could be encoded within matter itself, just as DNA is a form of mind information processing. Thus, also, all matter is processing of information in a form of mind. In total, the universe is total mind and body. Is information in itself capable of change? Change requires dimension of time, but also an impulse which acts over time against a stagnant inertia. Information can be represented by language, but this is insufficient for change. There must be a mechanism for the enacting of information for its manifestation and unfolding. This impulse in itself we call will. It is not the body which is a product of the mind. It is not the mind, but rather the origin of the mind. For without will, mind is inert. Without the will to live, there is no DNA. Matter may be encoded within the gravitational constant, which is used to calculate energy, but this information, which encodes a precise measurement, is not identical with the impulse for attraction or repulsion between particles, or even the bending of space-time. Thus, the origin of the body is in the mind. The origin of the mind is in the will. In Hawaiian, the animating spirit behind all things, behind both the calculative and the bodily, is called the breath of life, Ole. In Abrahamic and Platonic theology, God is considered the unmoved mover. The will, in its essence, is the origin of all things, mind and body in the universe. In Eastern philosophy, is called the Tao or Way. God then is not a body nor an object. The mind of God, as such, would be the totality of all minds and the totality of all intelligence. But God precedes mind, is the origin of mind. God is neither a mind nor a body nor an object. God is the opposite of an object. He is pure subject. This is why we give him a gender. As sex as humans, we perceive men as more active and women as more passive. God is pure activity, the origin of all action. However, because women are the origin of humans, the Tao is called the Great Mother. This gendering is related to the European and Semitic relationship, to violent hierarchies and intertribal sadism, versus the Eastern strategy of centralization and pacification. Understanding the nature of God, we also understand our highest aspect, that which is closest to God, being our will. Without the will, our calculations and physical strength means nothing. The desire is the origin for all action, and the mind and body are mere tools for this action. In this sense, will is the most pure and the smallest aspect of matter. When matter coheres into larger structures, the will interacts in a system, as can be seen in Conway's Game of Life. We owe all that we are to the will, and no amount of intelligence or brawn can overcome this. Western man has forgotten his will and remembers it only in hedonism, moralism, and self-destruction. In fact, hedonism is closer to God, and to destroy oneself is closer to God than to be apathetic. Apathy is the supreme evil and sin against God. Apathy is a form of defense of the ego. The ego fears confrontation with pain. It shuts out this pain with apathy. We should not cut ourselves off from our emotions, but this cutting off of apathy comes itself from a desire for survival. In German, the term for suicidal is Lebensmüde, tired of life. This tiredness is the result of exhaustion. Consider a small metal string bent into the shape of a paperclip. Bend it back and forth too many times and it will break. Modern life has imprisoned the human spirit and broken it. This is a form of spiritual genocide which has been forced on the masses. The elite have replaced the masses with automation and conspire to destroy them at the deepest level, the spiritual. How does the average man resist? What must he do? He must connect with God, his creator, his origin, and the father of his true essence. In reconnecting with the spiritual, man will engage in the ultimate struggle for his soul against the princes of the world. As social creatures, we know that we become more like the people we surround ourselves with. Therefore, we must surround ourselves by our spiritual superiors, those who can teach us, those we can learn from. The locus of power. Where is power? Is it in DC, Pentagon, Wall Street, Hollywood, London, Beijing? Is it in Switzerland or the Cayman Islands? Is it in Little St. James? What makes these places halls of power famous and infamous is the people who frequent them. And what makes the people more powerful than you or me? Are they stronger, faster, taller, more beautiful, or more intelligent? Do they possess more willpower, work ethic, or stamina? On average, all these things are true, age adjusted, but they are neither necessarily true nor sufficient explanation for why some have more power than others. The best explanation for power is religion. A religious structure, certain rules, dogma, hierarchy, and the ability to move up and down the ranks, social mobility. Religions can engage in warfare like a military, but unlike a military, their scope is much wider, deeper, and longer lasting. A military can, through force of arms, occupy a territory. A religion, through force of belief, occupies the mind. Secular liberalism serves as a distraction from this basic truth. It claims that we have progressed beyond religion, removed it from our schools, governments, and entertainment. Religion is a primitive superstition relegated to an anachronistic churches. Religion is a type of drug, an opium for the masses, wishful thinking to avoid the fear of death. This claim of secular liberalism, that it alone holds the truth in contrast to myriad religions, is nothing new. When Zoroaster appeared in ancient Persia, he condemned all the devas as devils and stated that there is one true God worthy of worship, Ahura Mazda. The cult of Aten-Ra in Egypt tried and failed to emulate this model, but the Jews after them succeeded. Christian critics of secularism often call it pagan, but nothing could be further from the truth. On the contrary, secular liberalism is a religion which discards those elements of Christianity which it shared with paganism. Localism, family values, patriarchy, the sacrament of the marriage, the cult of the virgin. Secular liberalism is completing the job that started with Zoroaster, Aten-Ra, Judaism, and Christianity. Toward where? Globalism, alienation, consumption, individualism, feminism, economic androgyny. But why? When we contrast these two value systems, what makes one better than the other? Christianity has no objective reference frame by which to judge the genealogy of morals. For Christians, these values are good in themselves axiomatically. This dogmatic attitude can be found in the Jewish observation of the mitzvot, which are good in themselves without justification. The sacralization of axioms solves problems of justification. Who are we? What is good? What is true? Sacralizing axioms reduces uncertainty, which is the greatest psychological burden of humanity. The inability of Christianity to engage in self-criticism is not a bug but a feature and confers an evolutionary advantage. Nonetheless, the changes in morality and religion are not without cause. Spengler believed that they were due to a biological clock of civilization that dictates to each cultural life cycle. Toward the end, degradation, degeneration, entropy, and chaos surge, giving way ultimately to death and decay so that eventually a new culture may take its place. Spengler deserves credit for being one of the best proponents of this idea, which he derived from the Greeks. I argue that this philosophy of degeneration represents the essence of a psychological drive, the fear of death, which animates the right wing. It is this which forms the core of rightism in the human mind, which exists even in the animal mind. Despite superior intelligence, Spengler's thesis is flawed. Spengler's defenders imagine him as a Cassandra, an unheard alarm, warning of impending doom, but Spengler has not been misunderstood or ignored. The degeneration which he ascribes to natural processes is rather artificial. The mercantile incentive structure. Man began as a hunter. The consumption of meat high in fat and protein allowed man to develop his relatively large brain. With this brain, he discovered agriculture. For 9,000 years, agriculture remained the most sophisticated form of wealth generation known to man. In the last 1,000 years, the seeds of a new mode of production began to be planted. In the 11th century, Islamic Spain developed a clock unrivaled in its use of complex gearing until the mechanical clocks of the 14th century. In 1336, Richard of Wallingford designed a mechanical clock to investigate celestial phenomena. The Salisbury Cathedral clock, built in 1386, is the world's oldest surviving mechanical clock. The clock was a move toward empiricism, the method of discrete and reproducible observation. In the years between 1346 and 1353, however, Europe suffered a massive genocide in the form of the Black Plague. Up to 30% of the population died. As a result, the ruling elite was placed under significant stress. Many peasants became landowners as land became cheaper and more plentiful relative to the population. This threatened the social security of the elite. Furthermore, the population reduction opened up opportunities for competition between elites. During this period of stress, there was renewed interest in classical Greece and Rome, which led to the Renaissance. Eventually, clocks became precise enough that they allowed Tycho Brahe to develop a new astronomy where the planets revolves around the sun rather than the earth. With a new cosmology, new art, and a new sense of time in 1635, Cavalieri published his work on Indivisible. Okay, I need to fix that.